The 2.7 update has brought in the clouds everyone's been waiting for, tweaked a few things like splash damage, but amongst others, it's also tweaked the sound effects, most notably the cannon. Sounds epic. Both in and outside the cockpit, it sounds magical. The only patch note that was there, specific in the last update for the Black Shark, is that they finally removed the dead zones for access slewing. So before, I would have hardly recommended that when you're using the Shkval, you have specifically these keys mapped, the KU31 up, down, left, right. So I'm using a Thrustmaster TCWS throttle, which supposedly has a very good slewing hat built into it. It's got maybe a millimeter of travel before I start feeling pressure, and then it starts reacting. And before, I would have hardly recommended use these. In my case, I'm using software to bind these two keys, which are then, used to, this is me touching the slewing hat. Note there is also a Shkval center key for literally ball sighting a Shkval. I don't know if that's in the real Shark, it's not really ever mentioned in the manual, but there's a key that you can use for it. And it's similar to a Shkval reset, just note that these things don't hop to the center instantly or ball sight, the Shkval physically has to move all that distance. Now I'd recommend that you use these instead of the Axis commands. You don't use both at the same time, but just, instead of the Absolute Shkval, which you would think would have a more precise, effect. Now, I'm just quickly going to clear these and show you this. So the KU31, if I uncage, make sure I'm in wide field of view, you can see it moves quite quickly. It'll transverse the whole left, middle to left in about just over 5 seconds. But otherwise, it has also got quite a bit of control. If I zoom out and now I want to hone in on this guy, I can do so fairly quickly enough. Don't ask me about this flicker the Shkval has in the new update, that is possibly a bug. But anyway, now the downside is that, for example, tracking this moving target, I have to keep tapping right, as the Shkval's only got one speed once the button is activated. Other than it starting to accelerate, so you'll see it's got a little bit of acceleration time, but other than that, yeah. And it's fairly quick and precise to move it on stuff. So it's both quick to transverse across the screen to slew around, as well as locking someone up. And in this case, I'm less keeping my hand on the thing than I am just nudging and tapping it. But that's just technique I've learned, and not necessarily good technique that you should follow. Now, the new update in this patch note that I was referring to, I'm going to take away these keybinds for the Shkval on the KU31 and instead go into access commands and then Absolute Shkval horizontal. This is my slew at left, right, and then up, down. And I'm leaving the curves in default for now, just to show you. Now I can fully control the speed of it. So if I find myself a moving target here somewhere, there's a BTR, I think. And I can try and match its speed, and I can try and do so exactly without having to nudge, nudge, nudge like that. I'm busy catching up to it slowly, and I need to slow down. I can try and match its speed a little better here, which is useful in low-line situations. Hopefully soon I'll upload a video showing me hunting a hind in the fog and the dust, and of course the Shkval won't lock in those low visibility conditions, so then you need to manually steer in your Vicar so that the air-to-air burst does its thing. So this way I can track it, but you'll see that it's quite twitchy. It's very... you definitely can't flick it, you need to keep your hand on it, and it's quite jumpy. So I've been playing around with the curves and trying to get this right, but it is tricky. Now, there are a few downsides that I've found to this. So I'm going to reset the Shkval, wait a second so it actually recenters, uncage it without the helmet, and now if I, in wide angle view, go purely left, you'll see it takes almost double the amount of time, it's something like 12 seconds last I checked, to transverse from the center right to the far extremities. So it's actually traversing more slowly than it used to with the keybinds. And that, in combination with what I've just shown you in terms of how twitchy it is, makes it problematic. Now there are, of course, like, what about curves? Well, you can go and tweak them. The best one that I found is actually dipping the saturation down quite a bit, but the problem is that slows down the maximum traversal rate even more, and now it is at a snail's pace. You can also apply curves, but I found those become rather twitchy. And that is not the only problem. So I'm going to reset this. If, on a cage, I move down. If I move to the, like, slowly up and down, because maybe this target's busy bobbing and weaving. Yeah, great, it's going diagonal. However, if I max out the up-down deflection now, so I'm going to go in the opposite direction now, I'm going to go diagonally down, then diagonally up. And now you'll see it stopped moving right. As soon as you just switch diagonal directions, diagonally up, diagonally down, and now it stops moving right. I'm holding it diagonally, sort of all the way fully right on the slewing hat, but it's not doing it anymore. And what you will what you will notice if you go into the axis commands here, I'm holding in diagonally down right, diagonally up left, and now I can cycle through it in various little circles very subtly. We're going diagonally up right, down right. It registers that. It's not locking out in DCS. It's specifically, I'm assuming, a bug with the Shkval, whereby it locks out like this when you try and switch diagonals after you do extreme diagonals, and there it's locked out. And this is obviously quite annoying for any kind of technique that you may have with trying to work through it. So, it's slower, it's more twitchy, so, downing the saturation makes it controllable, but even slower than the KU31 keybinds already are. And it's got this, at least at the moment, this diagonal bug for you to watch out for. Now, like I said, I've been experimenting with curves, and I didn't quite find anything that worked outside of a weird Frankenstein technique. So, I'm going to map the KU31 keybinds again, but I'm doing this in addition to the Absolute Axis command. So at the moment, I've got both of these running. So what's going to happen is I gain a little control with the Shkval, but I also gain, in terms of it gets the full max speed again, regardless of what I do with the curves now on the Absolute Shkval. It's got that minimum speed where it traverses the full, sideways. I think it's 30 degrees in about 5-ish seconds, 5-6 seconds. But in addition, it's also quite controllable. Now, I've been playing around with these, and my slewing hat will probably not be the same as yours, even if you have exactly the same gear. And I mean, it just might not be what you're feeling comfortable with. So I've tried around, especially I had some success with desaturating this all the way to 30. Now, this only works because I've got the KU31 keybinds happening as well. So then you can put it like this and it won't move like molasses. It will have a decent clip to it. But now it's got a fine control, you've got a bit of speed control, and a little bit of the curve helps. I mean, you can even up it more or play around to see what works. I've tried around with that and I've had some success with it. But instead, what I'm going to do is just null that out. And I've actually been practicing around or tested out a even weirder curve set, and this again would be something that you can try, to apply these same curves that I'm adding in now, but they may not be for you. And you'll see all that I'm doing is adding a bit of a spike at the beginning of the, switch those around, adding a bit of a spike in the beginning, 41, and I'm being pedantic about the numbers here, except it probably doesn't matter that much because this was all guesstimates to get a rough curve. So I'm just trying to get a bump relatively early on so it actually can start moving a bit faster, and then it smooths out, and then about here it accelerates again. I mean, you can make these curves even smoother or adjust them a bit more to your liking. I'm just giving you a suggestion of a possible working thing. And this curve I found for me to work reasonably well. So I've got these two bound in the axes, and in addition, in the normal KU31 keybinds, I've also got it says double mapped. Now, if I uncage and it's at the center, I traverse and it goes around in about 5-6 seconds all the way to the side. In addition, if I were to wide angle view slew down, try and get in this Apache, I've got some more control. Look, this is a hard lock either way. But I can sort of keep tabs on them, I can try and keep speed. Now, because I've got the keys happening as well, the KU31 keybinds, there is a minimum speed that it will travel at. So it's not as perfect with tracking a moving target, but I've still got quite a bit of finesse happening, and there is a bit of tracking for moving targets. Let me just find a smallish target here, like this man. And here we go. Slewed onto him. So I find that I've still got quite a bit of control. It's not perfect. It has also, by adding these keybinds, if I now do that diagonal trick where it locked out, so I'm not going to go right across, diagonally up, diagonally down, you'll see that it has actually locked out like it did before. However, since the keybinds are still happening, it is still moving, albeit a bit slower. So it's a workaround. Hopefully they'll fix the bug, because then diagonally up and down at full, maximum deflections of the slewing hat has the same result. But this way at least it keeps moving. Alternately, if it locked out, I would have had to leave the slewing hat and then re-engage if I was only using the Slew Axis to make it move. So, I would recommend either trying these weird axes and then living with the fact that it might slow down if you're switching diagonals, which is entirely likely, especially if you're circling a target and now it starts behaving weirdly. Again, I can't comment on this Shkval flicker which is happening, which shouldn't be the case. I am aware as well that people before have used both the KU31 and Axis on separate controls, so they'll use the KU31 for maybe moving rapidly across, and then a very desaturated Axis slew for up-close fine work. I prefer to keep it a little simpler and having only the one, but you can incorporate these methods as well to have an even more refined approach maybe. So, test around, we'll see what's for you. It's not perfect, this new implementation. As you can see, I'd had to work around it a little to get it to work in any kind of smooth way. But have fun. Cheers.